March 17th, 1962. Thule Air Base, Northwest Greenland. Wind howls across the ice like a living thing, rattling steel towers and flinging needles of snow against reinforced concrete. Inside a radar control room buried beneath permafrost, Captain William H. Anderson, United States Air Force, leans closer to a glowing green screen. The low hum of electronics fills the air. Steady, relentless. The sound of a war that has not yet begun. Outside, the temperature hovers at -30 degrees Celsius. Metal shrinks, skin cracks, nothing grows. And yet, this frozen island, barren, distant, and almost uninhabited, has become one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Captain Anderson adjusts his headset as a blip crawls slowly across the radar scope. It's only a calibration echo, nothing more. He knows that. Still, his jaw tightens, because if that blip were real, if it were moving faster, higher, it would mean the unthinkable. Soviet missiles rising from silos half a world away, their fiery ascent already visible from Greenland's skies. You wouldn't guess it by looking at it. Greenland feels forgotten, a white emptiness at the top of the map. But in the early 1960s, it sits squarely at the center of nuclear geometry, the shortest path between the Soviet Union and the United States. Over the pole, over the ice, over Thule. The radar Anderson watches is part of BMEWS, the Ballistic Missile Early Warning System. Massive phased array antennas stare eternally toward the Soviet Arctic. Their purpose is brutally simple: detect an intercontinental ballistic missile launch within minutes. Not hours, not even tens of minutes. Just enough time. 15, maybe 20, for Washington to decide whether the world ends today. Every man in this room understands that math, what Captain Anderson does not see, cannot see, is how closely his station is being studied from the other side of the planet. Moscow. The same day, deep inside the General Staff Building, Lieutenant General Sergei Matveyev, Strategic Rocket Forces, stands before a wall-sized map. Red pins mark American bases. Blue arcs trace missile trajectories. His breath fogs faintly in the cold room. The heating here is unreliable, and no one complains. Matveyev taps the Arctic region with a pencil. Here, he says quietly. The room leans in. Greenland. To the untrained eye, it looks irrelevant, a slab of ice wedged between continents. But Matveyev knows better. He has read the classified intelligence reports. He has studied the American installations, Thule Air Base, Sondrestrom, the radar arrays capable of seeing over the curvature of the Earth. If they see us launch, Matveyev continues, they will have time. Time is everything. Time to confirm. Time to alert SAC. Time to scramble bombers. Harden command bunkers. Prepare a counterstrike. The Americans do not need to stop Soviet missiles. They only need to know they are coming. And Greenland gives them that knowledge. One of the colonels shifts uncomfortably. Comrade General, he says, Greenland has almost no population, no industry, no armies. Matveyev turns slowly. His voice is calm, but final. Then that is precisely why it is dangerous. Back at Thule, the sun never truly rises. It only skims the horizon, casting long blue shadows across the snow. Airmen move between structures through enclosed corridors, faces wrapped in scarves, rifles slung more from regulation than necessity. There is no enemy here. Not yet. Inside the command bunker, warning lights flicker as technicians run drills. Simulated launches, simulated impacts, simulated death. Each exercise follows the same grim choreography. Detection, verification, transmission to NORAD, escalation. Captain Anderson removes his gloves long enough to scribble notes. His hands sting almost instantly. He has learned to ignore it. Everyone here has, sometimes, in quieter moments, he thinks about how absurd it is that this place, a dot most Americans couldn't find on a map, might be one of the first places targeted in a nuclear war. Not New York, not Washington, but here, the ice would glow white-hot before the rest of the world even understood what was happening. In Soviet war planning documents, Greenland's name begins to appear more frequently, not as a footnote, not as an afterthought, as a primary target. Warheads are allocated, yield calculations are made, blast radii drawn across empty fjords and frozen tundra. The logic is cold and merciless. Blind the radar, and you blind the enemy. Destroy Greenland, and you buy yourself precious minutes. Minutes in which American leaders are deaf, blind, and guessing. Minutes in nuclear war are measured in cities. A young Soviet analyst notes the irony in a private journal. So much fire for so much ice. He never shares the thought. At Thule, Captain Anderson's shift ends. He steps outside into the wind, the sky shimmering faintly with aurora. Green light dances silently above him, beautiful and indifferent. He doesn't know it. But somewhere in Moscow, men are debating how many megatons it would take to erase this view forever. He looks up anyway, breath frosting the air, unaware that this frozen island, quiet, still, and seemingly invincible, has already been marked for destruction. October 24th, 1962. The Pentagon, Washington, D.C. The clock on the wall clicks past 2, 17 hours. Beneath fluorescent lights that never dim, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara stands with his jacket draped over a chair, sleeves rolled up, staring at a translucent overlay pressed against a globe. Red arcs stretch from the Soviet Union over the Arctic Circle, curving down toward North America like claw marks. Almost every line passes one place first. Greenland, shortest distance. McNamara murmurs, more to himself than to the room. Always was. Around him, Air Force generals, Navy admirals, and civilian analysts stand in rigid silence. This is the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the closest the Cold War has come to turning hot. Soviet ships move toward Cuba. American destroyers shadow them. Nuclear forces on both sides sit at DEFCON 2. And far above it all, over the pole, the missiles would fly. A strategic air command officer clears his throat. If they launch, he says, BMEWS gives us 15 minutes. Maybe less? And if BMEWS is gone? McNamara asks. No one answers immediately. They all know. Greenland is not defended like Berlin. There are no armored divisions, no missile shields, no fleets. It is defended by distance, cold, and the hope that no one would ever waste a warhead on a place so empty. That hope is thinning by the hour. Thousands of miles away, at Plesetsk Cosmodrome, north of Moscow, snow crunches beneath the boots of Colonel Viktor Sokolov. Strategic rocket forces. He watches as technicians complete final checks on an R-7-derived ICBM, its white body looming against the dark sky like a frozen spear. This is a drill. He knows that. The warhead is inert. The countdown will stop before ignition. Still, the procedures are identical to the real thing. Sokolov has read the target packages. He knows what sits near the top of the list. Greenland, Thule, the radar that would see his missile before it ever left the atmosphere. If war comes, his rocket will not be aimed at a city filled with millions. It will be aimed at snow, rock, and antennas. Strange war, one of the younger officers mutters beside him. Sokolov doesn't disagree, but he also understands the logic with terrifying clarity. Destroy the eyes first, then the rest of the body goes blind. Back in Greenland, the base hums with activity. DEFCON levels ripple outward. Felt even here. Flights are restricted. Guards double. Live ammunition replaces blanks. Captain Anderson is back at his console when the alert status changes. The radar sweeps faster now. Processors straining as data streams south to NORAD's Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Every false return, every anomaly, is scrutinized. A flock of birds once triggered panic in Florida. Here, ice crystals can do the same? Anderson leans toward the screen as a technician whispers, "You ever think about how fast it would happen?" Anderson doesn't look away. All the time. A Soviet launch would rise over the horizon. Infrared sensors would flare. The radar would see it, here first. Thule would speak before anyone else could. And then, almost immediately, Thule would die. They have run the simulations. They know the numbers. A multi-megaton airburst would flatten the base instantly. The shockwave would race across the ice, tearing steel and concrete apart like paper. There would be no warning siren, no time to reach shelter. Detection and destruction would be nearly simultaneous. Anderson signs off on a systems check with steady hands. Fear, here, is a luxury no one can afford. In Moscow, debates rage behind closed doors. Civilian leaders question the morality. Military planners dismiss the concern. Greenland is not a people. They argue it is a mechanism. A senior strategist writes in a classified memo, neutralizing Arctic early warning installations is essential for strategic surprise. The phrase strategic surprise appears again and again. It is the polite language of extinction. Maps are redrawn, warhead yields adjusted upward. The Americans are improving their radar, extending range, hardening installations. The solution, the planners conclude, is overwhelming force. If one bomb might fail, 3 will not. On October 27th, later remembered as Black Saturday, the world teeters. A U-2 spy plane is shot down over Cuba. Another strays into Soviet airspace near the Arctic. Chased by MiGs, submarine commanders debate whether war has already begun. At Thule, alarms briefly spike. A radar return behaves strangely, then resolves into nothing. A glitch, a heartbeat of terror. Captain Anderson exhales slowly, only realizing he had been holding his breath when his lungs burn. For a moment, the world nearly ends, not over Havana or Moscow, but here, in the frozen north, where detection precedes decision. The crisis passes. The missiles in Cuba are withdrawn. DEFCON levels ease. Men go home. The newspapers speak of triumph and restraint. But the war plans do not change. Greenland remains circled in red. Because the Cold War is not about today, it is about the next time restraint fails. And somewhere beneath the ice, the radar continues to watch the horizon, knowing that if the signal ever comes, if the blips are real, this island will be among the first to burn. January 21st, 1968. Near Thule Air Base, Greenland. The sky is black and moonless, the kind of Arctic darkness that swallows depth and distance. High above the ice, AB-52 G Stratofortress of the U.S. Air Force drones steadily northward, its 8 engines vibrating the frozen air. On board, Major Alfred de Mora, aircraft commander, checks his instruments for the 3rd time in a minute. This flight is part of Operation Chrome Dome, continuous airborne nuclear patrols meant to ensure that even a surprise Soviet strike cannot eliminate America's retaliatory force. Below him, Greenland slides past unseen. At 15,000 feet, something goes wrong. A cabin heater malfunctions. Smoke creeps into the cockpit. Warning lights bloom red across the panel. The aircraft begins to lose control. Fire, the co-pilot says quietly. Within minutes, the situation becomes unrecoverable. De Mora orders the crew to eject. The bomber plunges into the ice, detonating its conventional explosives on impact. The nuclear weapons aboard do not go off, but their casings rupture, scattering radioactive material across the frozen landscape near Thule. The Arctic night flashes briefly with unnatural light. At Thule Air Base, alarms erupt. Searchlights stab into the darkness. Emergency teams race toward the crash site, their vehicles carving tracks into snow that has not moved in centuries. Captain Anderson, older now, promoted, but still here, watches from a command post as reports come in. 4 hydrogen bombs, broken, contaminated. This is not war, but it feels like a warning. Within hours, Washington is on the line. So is Copenhagen. Greenland, after all, is Danish territory. Officially, there are no nuclear weapons here. Officially. The cleanup will take months. Thousands of tons of ice and debris will be removed. Men will work in radiation suits under auroras that ripple silently overhead. Many will later develop illnesses, None of this will be spoken of publicly for years. For Soviet intelligence analysts, the message is unmistakable. If a single accident can spread nuclear material across Greenland, imagine what a deliberate strike would do. In Moscow, the Thule incident reinforces existing fears and justifies existing plans. A classified assessment circulates through the Soviet General Staff. Enemy reliance on Arctic forward detection increases vulnerability. Early neutralization remains essential. Greenland is no longer just a radar site. It is proof of concentration, of American faith in early warning, in technology, in the belief that seeing first equals surviving. To Soviet planners, it is a single point of failure. Target zero. The 1970s bring détente on the surface. Treaties are signed. Handshakes photographed. Salty, SALT II. The language of limitation fills the air. Underneath, the targeting tables remain. Warheads grow more accurate. Guidance systems improve. Submarine-launched missiles join the equation, slipping silently beneath the Arctic ice. Even so, Greenland stays on the list, because submarines, too, need time, and time still comes from warning. At Thule, the radar is upgraded. New arrays replace old ones. Computers grow faster. Rooms warmer. Younger airmen arrive, barely aware of how close the world once came to ending. Veterans like Anderson say little. They have learned that the most dangerous weapons are the ones that never make noise. By the early 1980s, tensions rise again. NATO conducts Able Archer 83, a command post exercise that simulates nuclear release. Soviet intelligence misreads it as possible preparation for a real strike. For several days, Moscow prepares for the worst. At Thule, the radar sees everything it always sees. Satellites. Test launches, echoes, and sends the data south. No one here knows how close misinterpretation has brought the superpowers to disaster once again. The ice remains still. The antennas keep watching. And in Soviet plans, Greenland remains circled, annotated, calculated, not because it threatens invasion, but because it threatens awareness. In the end, no missiles ever rise over the pole. No warheads ever detonate above Thule. The Cold War exhausts itself, collapsing inward rather than exploding outward. When the Soviet Union falls in 1991, analysts gain access to fragments of old war plans, maps, target lists, yield estimates. Greenland appears again and again. A place with fewer people than a small town. A place the Soviet Union feared more than entire NATO armies. Because armies can be fought. But an island that sees the end coming, that steals surprise, can doom everything. The ice keeps its secrets well. Beneath the aurora and the snow, the silent geometry of annihilation fades into history, leaving behind radar towers, abandoned bunkers, and the unsettling knowledge that the quietest places are sometimes the most dangerous of all.